The greatest moment at Hilltop Park took place on October 10, 1904. In Major League Baseball, there is no regular season rivalry bigger than the one between the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees. Prior to the 1920s, the Red Sox had come into their own as one of baseball's elite teams, winning 5 world championships, while the Yankees had yet to win a league pennant. But after the 1920 season, the Yankees would turn the tables and eventually become the most storied franchise in all of baseball. They would have a long history of legendary teams and players and appear in 48 postseasons, which would include 40 American League pennants and 27 world championships, while the Red Sox would make the postseason only a handful of times and would win another World Series until 2004. The rivalry is considered to have started after the 1919 season, when Red Sox owner Harry Frazee sold star outfielder Babe Ruth to the Yankees, where Ruth would have his best years and become one of the biggest names in the history of sports. But the earliest traces of the Red Sox-Yankees rivalry go back to 1904. At the beginning of the season, the Red Sox, then known as the Americans, were the defending world champions and were favored to contend for a second straight year. They would open the season in New York, where the Yankees, then known as the Highlanders, would take the first game. But Boston would take the next 2 and win 18 of their first 23 games, and many people were believing that they were going to win their second straight American League pennant. The Highlanders, however, had also put together a good team, led by 23-game winner Jack Powell and Jack Chesbro, who would win a single-season record 41 games. The Highlanders would play steady ball for much of the season, and by July 23rd were 3.5 games out when they would catch fire, winning 9 of their next 10 to pull within half a game. After losing their next 4 games, they would win 13 of their next 16, and August 26th had a game-and-a-half lead on the Americans. But Boston would not go quietly, winning 14 of 19, and on September 12th would lead by half a game. Boston and New York would both battle neck and neck for the remainder of the season, and on October 5th, with 5 games remaining, the Americans would have a half-game lead on the Highlanders, and the 2 teams would finish the season in a memorable 5-game matchup. The series would open in New York, where the Highlanders would take the first game, but when the series shifted to Boston, the Americans would take the next 2, and heading back to New York were 1 win away from the American League pennant. Starting for Boston was 23-game winner Bill Dineen against Jack Chesbro. Both starters would hold each team scoreless for the first 4 innings. Then in the bottom of the 5th, Dineen would get into trouble. The Highlanders would put 2 runners on for Passy Dougherty, who would hit a single to bring home the game's first run. Dineen would walk 2 more hitters to give New York a 2-0 lead, and they would threaten for more, but Dineen would retire Jimmy Williams to prevent further damage. The game would remain 2-0 until the top of the 8th, when Boston would tie the score on a couple of fielding miscues. Then in the top of the 9th, Candy LaChance led off and hit a ground ball to shortstop Kid Elberfeld, but LaChance would beat it out. 2 outs later, he would be on third, and Freddie Parent would come up with a chance to give Boston the lead. Chesbro would throw him a spitter that would go over catcher Red Kleinow's head and all the way to the backstop, and LaChance would score to give Boston the lead. Parent would get a base hit, but Boston wouldn't score another run, and in the bottom half of the 9th, the Highlanders would threaten. Whit Conroy would come to the plate with 1 out and walk to bring up Kleinow as the winning run. Dineen would retire him on a fly ball, and the Highlanders' last hope was pinch hitter Jim McGuire, who Dineen would walk to put the tying run at second for Dougherty. Dineen would get to 2 balls and 2 strikes, and with the crowd on its feet hoping for a rally, Dougherty would swing and miss for strike 3 to give the Americans the American League Championship and end the first great pennant race in Major League history. Boston was scheduled to play the New York Giants in the World Series, who had the best record in baseball, but Giants manager John McGraw, along with owner John T. Brush, boycotted the series, with McGraw even stating that the Giants were already the world champions, and that the National League was, quote, the only major league. This would lead to the cancellation of the World Series in 1904, and after the season it would be made a rule that the champions of both leagues would be required to play in the World Series. The Americans would return to the Fall Classic in 1912 after they changed their name to the Boston Red Sox, and in what was their first year in Fenway Park, they would play the Giants for the first time and defeat them in an epic 7-game match, winning their first of what would be 4 World Series titles in the 1910s.